All right, good evening all. This is the breakout session for treasurers, or the second attempt at it, shall we say, after our experiment with breakout rooms went awry. So thank you all for coming back in. Obviously, these things are important, and the district governor-elect is very keen that we do our best to make sure that everybody's prepared before they start their year. So, as I said, tonight we're going to be dealing with treasurer and your responsibilities as it relates to that job. And presenting with me will be Assistant Governor Brian Knowles from the Bahamas, who is, like myself, also a chartered accountant. Hence, they think for some reason that we know something about being treasurers. So I'm teasing, of course, because we've both been treasurers in various capacities in Rotary for many years. So it's not a new task. So what I'm going to propose we do is, so still got a couple of people sauntering in, but I'll go to the slides that we're going to go over, and please, we want it to be as interactive as possible. So don't be afraid to speak up, unmute yourself if there's a point you're not clear on or you want to elaborate it, etc. But we want to try and facilitate a discussion about best practices and so on. And hopefully at the end of it, you'll have a solid understanding of what your job is as the incoming treasurer. I expect we'll be done in an hour, so it's not going to be too onerous. And with that, we'll kick it off. Just bring up the slides. Whoops. Okay. There we are. All righty. Okay. So as I say, we're here to talk about your roles and your role and responsibilities as a club treasurer. And the objectives for the session are to understand the job, obviously, how to manage the club's finances competently, your role in the financial reporting of the club, both internally and externally. And one sec, I gotta let these people in. Yeah, there we go. And best practices of being a treasurer. Okay. Okay, so your job as a treasurer is obviously a very important one in supporting the board and your president in particular. And let's see, one more to come in. It's also very crucial in allowing your club to carry out its objective through community service, through the projects you're doing, how to raise the money that is going to be used to facilitate those projects. And of course, my favorite part of it, to make sure that you support the Rotary Foundation, which is the engine that can help you do more in your community, locally as well as around the world. And so basically what you're there to do is to manage the club finances, collect and submit dues and fees, RI bills. We're going to spend more time on this in a separate slide, but RI bills dues twice a year, so July 1 and January 1, every 6 months. And the purpose of that, of course, is to take into account any new additions to the club halfway through the year, as well as any people that have exited, so that it's not an unfair, charging of fees. And You will have till the end of that month, technically, to be in compliance with RI. So when they say that the bills are due on July 1st, I can tell you now, and I think Brian will support me on this, it is highly unlikely that the bill is going to be available on July the 1st. My experience is more like July the 10th before they issue the bill. But as a treasurer, you will have access to Rotary.org, and you'll be able to see the bill for the club. And then you have until the end of the month, technically, to make the payment. The other thing, of course, is to report on the state of your club's finances, both to your membership. The board, in particular, will be wanting it every month at the board meeting. So we're going to talk a little bit about making sure that you have the right accounting system, you're producing the appropriate reports, etc., for the board to use to make decisions on how to handle the club's finances. And of course, working with the Rotary Foundation, particularly in 70/20, this is, I think, important. Unless you're in the US Virgin Islands, the rest of us aren't using the United States dollar as a base currency. So all the contributions to the Rotary Foundation are going to be converted to US dollars in any event. But you want to be familiar with how that process works and to be able to report back to the membership how the contributions were accounted for and handled. And I suspect, like my club, most of your clubs will be doing a lot of this where a club member says, I want to support the Rotary Foundation, you're the treasurer, here's some money, please send it in for me. You can do that. You have that ability to do it, and there's a neat way to do it in Rotary.org. But they can also do it on their own by logging in themselves. So, you know, we want to hopefully get your club members familiar with Rotary.org and using the digital platform in Rotary and donating on their own. The other benefit to that, of course, is once they log in, you're automatically tracked as that individual with your Rotary ID, etc. And so tracking your contributions towards Paul Harris, for example, is automatic, rather than relying on a treasurer who might make a mistake and you know, send Robert Judd's contribution to the foundation in and tick off Brian Knowles' name instead of Robert, you see. It's another reason why I try to encourage members to do it themselves. Okay. All right. So paying and view your club invoice, saving the paper by opting out of a paper mailed version. Actually, RI has done away with the automatically doing that. I think it's the other way around now. You have to beg them for a paper version of the invoice these days. So it's defaulted to the digital version, which, like I say, although it's technically available on July the 1st, my experience is typically after the first week that you'll be able to go in and see it. Maybe that's because I'm in a big club that's over 100 people, but I know that ours is never ready before 7th or 10th of July. And because your responsibilities may vary according to the laws of the land that you're in, obviously, and the cultural practices, you want to study the Learning Center. I would really hope to push this through this session tonight. I've been in the Learning Center in the last couple of months. There's been a complete revamp there. There's a ton of new stuff on it. And not just to do with handling money, but membership and all sorts of other aspects of being a Rotarian. And I would highly encourage you to make the most of the Learning Center. It's quite a tool and a resource for you. So, managing the club's finances, you're there to ensure that the stewardship of the club's funds is in good hands. And as I say, you want to make sure that you have an effective accounting system. you know, as I said, we want to try and make this as interactive as possible. Can anyone want to chime in on how best to go about this and what you think is acceptable, or what you've already established for that matter, or what your club has as an accounting system, just so that we can discuss how that all works. Robert, I saw you unmuted yourself.
I was going to
Oh, okay, go ahead. I'm not seeing the hands up.
Hello?
Yeah, did you?
Yes, I have my hand up. I just thought I'd share. We implemented MoneyMinder.biz, which is a cloud-based accounting software recommended for Rotary clubs, and it has worked very well.
What's it called again?
MoneyMinder.
Okay, I've never heard of it. Okay.
Yeah, it's like $159 a month. It's cloud-based, so you don't have to worry about having it on individual accounts or having it not accessible to all those concerned.
Right, and it's tailored for Rotary clubs or service clubs?
Yes.
Oh, that's neat. I must look that up.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously you can use that. You can use QuickBooks. A lot of clubs use QuickBooks as well, which also has an online version, cloud-based version. And frankly, others just use Excel spreadsheets, although anyone who's had lots of experience with Excel spreadsheets can tell you that's a recipe for some drama.
We Rotary clubs you the QuickBooks, and we do we're doing things a little different from the point of view. We don't have separate bank accounts for the general. When we do the separated in the book, concurrent designated purposes and so, but this is the system we use, and that's very. I'm just accustomed to it by now.
Brian, you had some comments, I think.
Yes, if you have not chosen a accounting software person yet, and you're exploring, do look at QuickBooks. But Sherry's application, MoneyMinder, is better configured for non-profit enterprises. It does a better job than QuickBooks for nonprofits. So if you haven't chosen QuickBooks or you can afford to switch, go to MoneyMinder, and it allows you to you have a succession. Somebody, your successor, is there on the cloud. You don't have to move the application from one system to the next. As long as you keep the subscription up, you could flow from one year to the next, one treasurer to the next, seamlessly.
Sounds like a good idea. Okay.
Just once. Just 1 second. Is MoneyMinders compatible with Club Runner?
Yes and no. I think Club Runner doesn't have a financial statement or an accounting aspect to it, except for a very simplistic way to bill and track billings for dues and events, etc., that you might have as a club. But it doesn't have the ability, for example, to produce a balance sheet or an income statement or that sort of thing. So it's fairly straightforward dues collection exercise.
I was just looking through Club Runner, and it allows you to export into QuickBooks in terms of information can be exported into QuickBooks.
Right, and you can do that. Obviously, they're defaulting to the most well-known application. So you could set up your dues and billings and so on. I know we use Club Runner to generate the invoices for annual dues in my club, and also to track the receivables.
Yeah.
Because it allows you to go in and put in the payments as they come in. But by no means is it an accounting system. It's really just a receivables tracking system.
Yeah. Okay. You have school, so weekend you should get by weekend.
Natalia, I think you had your hand up as well.
Yes, I actually just wanted to say that we also use QuickBooks at the Rotary Club of
Rotown, okay.
And I think that it's a pretty comprehensive software and also able to generate the reports that you need.
Yeah, it is, but it is definitely business centric. So to Brian's point, it sort of defaults to something that's pursuing profit as opposed to a non-profit like a Rotary Club.
Yes, I agree with that.
Right. But I guess the bottom line is there's lots out there that you can choose from, as long as you have something that you're comfortable working with and is by all means easily transferable. Like that's another issue. We had that issue in my club too with QuickBooks. QuickBooks was actually installed on a laptop, and of course the motherboard of the laptop died, and so went the accounts as well. So we got away from doing it that way. But you learn the hard way, I guess. And then Robert brought up the next item, indirectly, I suppose. But if you can, it depends obviously on the size of the club. If you're a very small club, it doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense to separate the bank accounts. It may not be practical, but to the extent that you're able, you really do want to have a club account and a community service account. And you also want to have any of those accounts under dual signatory. So, you know, not just one person can move things in and out. Not that you're expecting anybody to do anything untoward, but the fact that they have to collaborate together enforces accountability. So it's always a good process to follow. And of course, what your main function is really to manage and track the incoming and the outgoing funds in that 12 months that you're the treasurer, or longer if you're unfortunate enough to be doing it year after year. I know I did a 2-year stint as the treasurer of my club, and I couldn't wait for that second year to end. But you know, it's it's important to keep on top of it. Again, using examples, I know I've seen where clubs the treasurers hasn't recorded stuff for the last 2-3 months or whatever, and it can just create a nightmare, especially if you're trying to determine, you know, what the club has in order to pursue this project or that project. You really need to be on top of timely reporting of finances. So I encourage, you know, what I used to do was once a week I would go in and update it for whatever happened that week. So at the end of the month, I spent maybe half an hour, turning it into balance sheet and income statement, so that I could go to the board meeting without having to spend half a day fighting with the accounts. So again, you're managing the clubs, the project, and the Rotary grant funds. If you are involved in any grants from the Rotary Foundation, district grants, which our district is quite involved in, has had one every year since they came about, which was 2014, if I remember correctly. We encourage clubs to do that so that they can do these smaller projects with less rigorous oversight than a global grant, and report within that year and move on to the next one with another district grant. But of course, if you're also involved or alternatively involved in a global grant, you definitely need to be on top of that, and you, without a doubt, have to have a separate bank account for the global grant as opposed to the club's accounts for anything else. That's a requirement by the foundation, and they will also want copies of the bank statements, etc. So you need to be able to prove that it's the only thing going in and out of there is that grant money. The budget, again, by now, hopefully you've already had talks about next year's budget, and or certainly in the month of June, yeah. We want to be fine-tuning and finalizing that budget with the president and the board in close consultation with you as a treasurer, and make sure that you know what it is your targets are for the year, both in fundraising and spending. And of course, providing the regular updates to the board, as I say, at least at the monthly meetings, unless they're required more frequently than that. You should also be prepared to report to the club. It may not need to be in as detailed a fashion as the board report, but to highlight pros and cons of how you're proceeding against budget, etc., throughout the year, I would suggest is a good idea as well. Maybe even as part of your bulletin, a simplified report on the club's finances that could be appended to the club bulletin as it goes out, whether it's digital or printed. And of course, managing the district and Rotary International filings and payments. The district is responsible for its own collection, so you will be, I would imagine, hearing from your AG as to the district dues that are due in the first half of the year and the second half. And of course, RI is a little bit more regimented, as I said, and is available at rotary.org in great detail. You can see everything that's in there, what they're billing you for, and how to pay it.
Yeah, back to reporting to the board and to the club. I want you to give a thought to this as to what a financial report can look like. If you really think about it, the financial report can embrace every activity of the club. Every avenue of service can be addressed in your financial report through giving a financial recap of the activity in each avenue. The board should be submitted, what should be submitted to the board are budgets from each avenue of service, reflecting the planned financial activity. So especially in community service, they should be presenting a budget. And as they go through their activities in the community, they should be submitting all of the financial transactions related to that particular activity. All the activity can be reflected in the financial report. So before the year ends, if you're so inclined to take that approach in reporting, you could set up a template where you can discuss briefly as a cover note to your financials the activity in each avenue of service. This would round out and fulfill your obligations to the board and to the club, in that you're acting as a financial advisor. You know what's happening in terms of the activities and how it reflects in the financial records or the financial performance of your club. So it takes a little effort up set up a template. But as you explain activities to the board on a monthly basis, you'll find that your officers and directors will be making more sound decisions going forward. They will have a full scope of what is going on financially in the club. And you'll be reflecting the activities in an objective way. And by the middle of the Rotary year, you will find out it will only take the president, the secretary, and treasurer to run everything. You know, and that'll make so give that some consideration. It'll take a little bit of work up front, but you'll find that as the year goes on, it's going to make it very easy. If you have your accounting system set up to generate the reports you need, just plug in the figures, put an explanation on it, and boom, you're done.
And there are templates. Yeah. There are templates at the Learning Center as well as on Rotary.org on the suggested layout and so on. And to Brian's point, on the income statement side of it particularly, is divided into areas of focus or avenues of service might be, I think, the way they do it. But it does help to focus in on what it is that a Rotary Club does, and it's probably a good way to go about it. And it also has, obviously, what your actual numbers are, a budget column, and then a variance so that you can have the appropriate discussion about why you've not hit budget or over budget or under budget or whatever the case may be when you're having the board meetings.
One other point in comparing QuickBooks to other software, QuickBooks is very strong on tracking jobs. So if you have a community service job, QuickBooks can track the revenue. If you have an event, the expenses related to that particular event or program or service project, and can affect it more efficiently than I've seen in other software for the same.
Okay. I noticed a couple of questions in the chat room as well. Robert was asking how many are new treasurers. Are you a new treasurer, Robert? Is that why you asked the question?
No, I was curious. I've been there since 2013.
Okay, crikey.
Few years.
You've been at it a while then.
Yeah.
So you should be doing this session, not me. I've only done it twice.
I don't have the letters after my name.
Oh, okay.
I just have the 40 years of banking.
There you go. Well, that should hold you in good stead. Talia was asking about the risk for not completing an annual audit. You mean of the club's books? Yeah.
That's correct.
That's a good question, because it is suggested that you get your accounts audited every year, but it is not required. Now, I say that because I know a lot of clubs, in fact, I would hazard the guess that the majority of them are not audited. They may be reviewed, as we call it in the accounting profession, but more often than not, they're not audited, especially in recent years as audits have become a little bit more,
Costly.
what should we say, demanding and definitely costly, yes. But I think the point is you really do want to have an independent review of what you've been doing, not just for the sake of the club, but to protect you as the treasurer. You want to make sure somebody comes on and says, you know, I've looked at everything and what Italia did was appropriate, and there's nothing that I can find that's amiss, et cetera, et cetera. It's good for you, and it's also good for, obviously, for the club and good accounting practice.
What about?
Yep, Robert.
Italia started.
Well, I was going to follow up on what you were saying about the audits. You don't need an audit in order to apply. Do you need an audit in order to apply for grants?
No, to my knowledge, you don't. I've certainly never seen it asked in a grant application. What they concern themselves with is whether your club and your district has ever been non-compliant in a grant in the past.
Okay.
And for what reasons. So that's what gets you in trouble with the foundation. But now that you say that, the particularly larger grants, in global grants, for example, you will find that you are going to need to have that grant management audited as opposed to the club's finances. It's a separate process.
Okay.
You know, I think it's anything, if my memory serves me, it's anything over 50,000 in a grant. They're going to want to see an audit. Yeah. But that's not as onerous as it sounds, because, you know, grants are very directed, and you have only one income item when the grant comes in, usually, unless you are partnering with a non-Rotary entity. And then, of course, the management of the expenditures against the budget that got you the grant in the first place. So, you know, it's not that difficult to do. Having done a number of them myself.
Lindsay, I was just going to say, as far as the audit, from the audit point of view, what we do is we have the statements or the reports reviewed by two people within the club that have some financial knowledge, and they get the full details. But what we do is on a monthly basis, the board gets the full balance sheet, full P&L, the receivable summary, the receivable date details, because of the it's easy to take it from July 1st to year where it is, so they can see all the activity in that. And what I do occasionally is on the P&L and the P&L, I'll also provide the board with the P&L with all the transactions, so they can actually go through the whole transactions. They get a copy of the bank accounts, bank reconciliation, and everything, so they can see the bank statements. They can see the money in the account, and then once the board approves all that, like the board report is about 8 documents, and then once they've approved all that, that whole detailed thing goes out to all the members. So if people want to spend the time and go through it, they can do it. If they don't, it's there for them. So
very good.
And when I'd mentioned about the separate bank account, one of the ways we do manage that is that if we've raised money specifically for a project, it'll be either every 3 months, 6 months, or whatever it is. If that project is not completed right away, that money is allocated in a long-term liability, so that at the end of the month, I do a recap where you see the bank accounts, so the cash that's available, you see the long-term liability. As long as there's surplus, everything is there. So we try and separate it that way, especially if it's going to go year. right? So we will have in our long-term liabilities, we'll have things for like at general funds where we've raised money and there's surplus monies at the end of the year that goes into the general fund. It's gone for this. So, and then the following year, if you have to use it, you just take it back into your account. So it's a little more complicated than that, but it's definitely separated.
No, well, that's, I mean, those are really good practices, and certainly more detailed, I think, than is required, but certainly, I think, very, well, it's a good way to make it very transparent. And talking about accountability. That's terrific. All right. Which takes us, we've already started, frankly, talking about a lot of this stuff just now, but that's fine. What Robert has been referring to generally is what we call best practices. So, you know, a lot of those things are very good practices to have. One of the things on here I think is very important that sometimes gets overlooked is making sure that you have an appropriate handover from whoever you're taking over for or from. So the previous treasurer, that top item, address pertinent issues with outgoing treasurer and make sure that you understand everything that you're being given. Anything could happen. The person could leave Rotary, could be moved for job reasons, etc. And you haven't understood everything that's in the statements or in the detail of the transactions, and now you don't have access to them, and you're in trouble. You don't want to have that happen. So you know, please make a point of insisting that you have a solid session with the outgoing treasurer to understand everything you're taking on and the situation of whatever they are in your club's finances. Okay, now, again, as Robert said, if you're really adept at tracking, yeah.
I was just
sorry, go ahead.
One of the things we did do, because when I ended up starting and taking over, is we made sure that the treasurer did update manual. So like a manual,
yeah,
for what she did, and I update that every once in a while. I haven't done it for a couple of years, but it's updated so that if anybody's coming in, they can easily take it over.
Another good practice. Excellent. Sounds like you all need to be doing the accounting for every club.
No.
So take it over.
Not the way I do it.
Okay. Okay, so we've talked about a lot of this. Separate bank accounts where practicable. Dual signatures, definitely. You don't want to be a sole signature. Trust me. And make sure that you spend some time on the budget now, and also have regular comparisons and updates of the budget, and see and analyze where you're going and why you're not hitting the numbers. Nobody's going to get in trouble, quote unquote, for not hitting a budget, but you need to be able to explain why. You know, if we thought we were going to do X here, why aren't we at X? You just need to be able to explain that effectively.
I have a question.
Yeah, so we've dealt with a number of these things. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Do any of your clubs provide forms, like a data entry form that maybe be completed at each meeting, at the end of each meeting, or forms that could be completed by anyone who is involved with a financial transaction? No, I guess not. Well, the whole objective, I've got two clubs that would do this.
And we do have forms at
You have forms there?
At our club, Old Fort.
Old Fort.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, that's anytime that the requisition for cash, check, or transfer, you have to get it approved. The information is that which community is requesting the funds, the supporting documents, before it's approved.
That is one of my 2 clubs that handle it this way. And the objective is to push the work as close to where the financial transaction take place as possible. So
Right.
it makes work easier on the treasurer and whoever has to do the record keeping.
Right.
So if the form is properly designed, it will give you the entry. And it will give you all the documentation needed for your record.
Correct.
So for instance, if you have a form for each meeting, there you would record your fine, your raffle, whatever financial transaction happened at that meeting. There's the documentation. All you have to do was for your assistant is just do the key it to QuickBooks or whatever accounting system you use, and boom, there you go.
Yeah, that's all part of the attendance sheet. So you have the attendance sheet, that's part for the cash and then your letter.
That's right.
Yeah.
So for anyone who is taking that, you need to give them the appropriate form, like service, community service guy, or whatever, you give them the appropriate form, show them how to fill it out. There you go. You have all
So,
the,
yeah, I think Robert's referring to that club runner attendance sheet. It has a section on it for cash inflows and outflows.
yes,
So,
that is a very useful form to use as well. You could print those out, or you could see it online. In the meeting, actually, at the end of the meeting, have it.
yeah.
And that's right. Those
Yeah.
that action through Club Runner API transferred into QuickBooks.
That's what I used to do. I would update it while we were sitting. So when I got back to the office, I was done.
And the other thing we do is that when we get the payments for the obviously outgoing payments, they have to be approved, invoices, and they have to be approved. But the payment receipts from the members, if it's not a direct deposit, then there's somebody other than myself also making the deposits. So you have 2 sets of people involved in the deposit. So I can manage it from the bank, reviewing the bank deposits, etc. But there's also somebody else that actually makes up the deposit and makes the deposits to the bank. So
Cool.
there's separate sort of
Separation of duties.
separation of duties.
Good. Okay. All right. I think we've covered all of this stuff here in one way, fashion or another that relates to best practices. But obviously, the point is you want to make sure that whatever you're doing is as defensible as possible. Whoops, I've gone the wrong way. Sorry. These are all designed to give you, better financial statements, better reporting that you can give to your club, to your board, and obviously help you shine as a responsible treasurer, which is obviously your goal. So, do you want to handle the remaining slides, AG Brian, or?
Oh, you're doing such a wonderful job.
Thank you, sir.
Please
Thought you
continue.
might. Okay, so in resources, as I mentioned, there are a number of things you can do. There's a treasurer's manual, which I'm not sure you will have received yet, because normally we hand them out at in-person pets. So I'm not clear on how that's all happening. Does anyone, have you received your manual as a treasurer yet? Anyone? No?
No.
Yeah, I think this COVID thing's turned everything upside down. So we're going to have to figure, I will follow up with DG Charles on what's happening with the manuals, because they should have been at least sent by courier or ideally digitally by now.
Was it not on the My Rotary?
It should be.
There's a version online.
Yeah. And I'll find that link too and shoot it out to everybody on the registration, so that
Yeah, the packages would usually be distributed to your AG.
Yeah.
And your AG would pass it on.
That's the way it normally happens. Okay. And as I say, your past treasurer is not only important to make sure that you have the proper handoff, but they're a great resource if you're getting stuck on why you don't understand why this is happening versus that. So make use of them, assuming that you're still speaking to each other, of course. The assistant governor, very important, will be more so next year. I know Charles's intention is to rely heavily on the assistant governors in the execution of the various oversight duties. And they're there as a resource to you. They're not bosses, quote unquote. The point is to help you perform better as a treasurer, a secretary, a president, whatever, as a Rotarian. That's the purpose of that position. So please don't forget to make use of them. Even if all they do is find the answer for you, they can do that as well. And the Rotary Learning Center, very useful, as I say. They've done a major revamp there, and there's a lot of cool things, new additions to it. I would suggest you go on. Most of the sessions I find are relatively, simple. Don't take a lot of time, 15 minutes to half an hour at the most. A couple of maybe longer, but for the most part, they're like that. So they don't, take up a whole evening just to do them. And hopefully, and at the end, you get a cute little certificate and everything else to prove that you finished the session. So you can hang that on your wall if that gives you satisfaction. But, as I say, there's a lot of new material there, and I think you might find it useful. So we've come to end of the stated slides and presentation. Hopefully we've met the objectives we set out at the beginning. And, I would just encourage an open discussion now about anything to do with the topic of being a treasurer. And Brian and I will do our best to facilitate the answers.
Just a point for your consideration. When you have completed your reports and presented to the board, and there are no, and you've addressed any amendments that are required, upload your reports to Club Runner.
Yeah.
There's a data repository within Club Runner where all your records, voting reports can be uploaded. Uploaded to that so that any member who would wish to review the financial records can do so from their Club Runner database.
Good point.
Actually, the whole board, the secretary should be minded to upload the minutes as well and direct the report so that any member can go in and review and do the.
And it may be that if they are doing that, then the financial report that the treasurer is given is going to be one of the reports they load up anyway. So, it's, my point is, it's something that may be done by the secretary and you may not have to do it. So. Okay. Any other points, questions, concerns, comments, etc., that we can address while we're all on here? Yes, Natalia?
Yes, I did have a question about the budget. I'm curious as to how many years did the other club prepare the budget for? The one that I saw was only for 1 year. And I know when I went into RI, it seemed like they do a budget for 5 years. So should we be doing it for at least 3 or 1 year?
Well, think about how a club's executive are set up. That generally you're only going to be doing 1 year. and the objectives of that board may be different than next year's board versus the board that came before it. So typically the budget that you're dealing with as a club treasurer is the budget for that year that you're entering into. And many times you won't be able to commit the administration after to things that are in a budget that you've set 3 years ago. So you may not want to do that. Now, RI, on the other hand, may be doing budgeting a little bit different as an organization, because they're not running a Rotary Club, they're running the massive organization. So I think that's why they do 3 to 5 year strategic planning, which we do as well, but also included in that is their budgeting.
When you say we, are you referring to the district?
No, I'm referring to we as Rotary clubs, individual clubs that have their own finances.
So are you saying that the strategic plan is for 3 years, but the budget is only 1?
Yeah, no, you can do a strategic plan for 3 to 5 years. That's the normal thing that they ask you to do. Typically, we don't. You may have general ideas about budgeting. You could say in a strategic plan that you're going to because of X, Y, and Z, we want to implement a change to the dues structure. And so just as RI is doing right now for the last 3 to 5 years, every year the dues have gone up, but the ultimate objective of that was not to hit us with a big increase in 1 year. So that by the end of, I think it's next year, dues are not set to go up any further, but they've been going up $1 or $1.50 every year for the last 5 years, for example. And that kind of thing could be incorporated in a club's strategic plan rather than, you know, telling the membership, well, you know, we see a hole here, or we need to increase our dues, so we're gonna go up by $50 this year. And of course, you'll have a bit of a revolt, I expect. So you could do that over time.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Hi.
Yes.
So,
Somebody. We must have
I'm wondering
2.
how the other clubs are handling collection or in-meeting happy dollars, charging advance fees. How have you done that?
Have you got two devices on Zoom?
I don't think so.
Okay. Because that's usually what creates the feedback. If you got your computer and your iPhone on the same call or something. Anyway, to answer your question, how do you account for, I think it was dues, fines and happy dollars and all that sort of thing? Yeah.
How do you collect them?
How do you collect them? Well, normally the sergeant levies them typically in the meeting, and then they collect them up and count them out. And at the end of, at least this is the way it happens in my club, they will put them into denominations and hand it over to the treasurer by the end of the meeting. And then I record it as fines and deposit it.
I'm asking since we're having Zoom meetings.
Oh, Zoom meetings. Okay, sorry, yes. Again, you have to be creative. And I think it was Robert that had alluded to it earlier about other than online transfers. Online transfers are becoming a very popular way to pay the club now, even before COVID, but certainly since this has happened, I can tell you that it's virtually the only way we're collecting money. So it is quite the task sometimes if people are sending you money from a different bank than the bank that you bank with. So if if you're in luck and the member of the club is banking with the same institution, it'll often say, you know, the deposit was made for $50 from Lindsay Casino, was the sender. But if Lindsay Casino banks at First Caribbean and the club banks at the Royal Bank of Canada, it'll show the $50 coming in, but it may not have my name on it, just says it's a credit to the account. And that's when it can get nightmarish for a treasurer, because you're trying to figure out who it came from, what it's for, is it dues, is it fines, are they contributing to a grant, you know, any number of things. Are they paying for the wine and cheese we had last week, you know, all that kind of thing. So, you know, I think part of our changing role, unfortunately, is we're going to have to educate the club members that aren't aware. A lot of people are these days, but some aren't. The nuances of online banking. And so, you know, I encourage any member of our club is told, if you're going to make a payment to us, always follow it up with an email to the treasurer saying what it is you're making that payment for. Now, inevitably, they don't all do it. And you're going to have one or two that you're fighting to find out who. We got a situation right now in my club where we can't figure out where this money came from. Go ahead, Robert.
Yeah, one of the rules we have is exactly as you say. If you've made a deposit, you have to scan a copy of the confirmed deposit, send that by email to the treasurer, and specify exactly what it's for. The other thing is, when I go into the internet banking, if you see a deposit and you don't know what it is, generally take a picture of it, send it out to the club, ask for people to respond within 48 hours. And if nobody responds, then it goes into donations. And if you come and claim it later, too bad.
Ah, see, they've thought of everything there. I'm telling you, I'm going to put Robert in charge of the whole district, the treasury.
I mean, it's a similar thing as you say, like on the, you know, you send out, and it's QuickBooks, but you send out the statements.
Yeah.
But, every month, I also send out to each one of the members the detailed printout to all the members, the same accounts receivable detailed printout, so you can see all the members, you can see what their payments have been, you can see who's behind, who's not. So it's a sort of a, you know what's going on. And
Right.
Then coming close to the end of the year, I ask for everybody to verify, because as the year end closes, anything after that, I don't look at.
It's next year's.
It's next year's, and you come questioning an invoice or questioning a payment that you made, and everybody says, oh, I made a payment, but they don't show you the deposits and stuff. So if you can't prove it, you haven't made it.
Right. Okay. Also, Sherry, I know one of the things that we did, I'm not saying everyone should do the same thing, was we made the suggestion to the members that because we knew that we would probably be doing this through April and May initially, and possibly June, just make one lump sum contribution to the club and call it fines, and we will take you through the last 3 months of the year. So I think Franny set that at, why don't you just give us $100 type of thing. And a lot of people have responded that way. So now we're not worrying about it every week. What are we doing about fines and so on? Yeah. Okay.
I'm not sure how all the other clubs do their dues and things like that, but one of the things that we've done is, because we're a lunch club, okay, forget now because of virtual, but the lunch club, so in our dues, it includes all the RI fees, all the club dues, the running of the club, as well as the lunches on an ongoing basis. So you're not collecting every time. And that way as well, if you're a member that shows up to lunch every week and you pay for it every week, you're not disadvantaged to the other members that don't show up, right? So It just goes in there. And as well, we added the $100 a year for every Rotarian every year and that type of thing. So it's all tacked into there. You've got your goals set. You've got your monies collected once it's invoiced and you collect. You've got the money so you can contribute to RI, etc. And it just makes it a lot easier. The fines is on a weekly basis virtually. Because it's virtual, we haven't been doing very much there. We've actually waived our fees. We do quarterly dues, and we've actually waived the fees for the last quarter, and it probably will be reduced for the next quarter as well. But it's just something we have to take the hit on and deal with it.
And then there are other clubs that don't have the meal included in the dues. So, in other words, the member pays at the door, whatever the institution is that you're having the meal with. And if you're lucky enough to be in that scenario, then great, then it's one less thing for you to do. But in the scenario that you referred to, Robert, obviously I can see why quarterly dues billing and collection is essential.
Yeah. And and we're a little different as well, because we have one of our members have graciously provided us with the use of a unit for a clubhouse. So we have our own designated clubhouse next to our restaurant, so we get that catered in, and we've had that for the last 3-4 years. So
right.
So it's you know, and as you said, the whole thing of trying to put everything in one amount, so that the only thing that's outside is if you have a special event, a special function, or special donation, at least you know your dues are so and so amount for the quarter.
Right.
All you have to contribute. Right. I mean, at lunches, yes, there's still some monies we raise through, as you mentioned, the fines for the happy dollars of fines, etc. But generally, monies are built into the dues for polio, unless we have a polio raising funds separately.
Right. Yeah, we do it similarly as well, except we don't have the meal aspect to deal with. So the $100 to the foundation is in the dues of every member of East Nassau. The other thing that we do is the bills go out on May the 1st for July 1st. So generally we are about 75% collected before the clock ticks over on July 1st. We've already got the money for the dues. So that's another thing you may want to consider is early billing. The other reason that you do that, bit of a cheat here, is all of us will know about the Great Purge, I'm sure. If you don't, let me just explain it quickly. At the end of every Rotary year, there's always some number of people who we're going to lose. For whatever reason, they're disgruntled, they're not having a good time, or they don't have the time, or it's too expensive, or whatever it is. And the reason I bring it up is it's very important to know that those people don't have the intention of continuing when you get to July the 1st, because if they are on that roster that Rotary International has on June 30th, you're going to be billed for it on July the 1st. So I'm saying, if you know that Tom has no intention of remaining in the club, you need to take him off the record before midnight on June 30th, or the club is going to get billed for that, and you have to pay for Tom, even though Tom's not paying. Okay? So just think
that's
that.
RI and district. That's RI and district dues.
Yes, RI and district, because they use the same list.
The other thing is for the Rotarian, the magazine.
Yes.
I'm not sure how many people are still getting it paper-wise, but I'll tell you digitally, it's the best way to go. We finally changed over because we were having issues getting it to start off with, and we're older club, and we've got some older people that prefer to have the hard copy, but we switched over about the beginning of this year, and it's clockwork. There's no issues. There's no
Oh, yeah.
hiccups with transportation and stuff like that. So it's a
And
good
it
thing.
gets delivered, yeah, that last week before the new month,
Yes.
you have the new issue. Yep.
A slightly reduced cost.
Half.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah. So that is another incentive to get everybody to go digital. You do have to get every member to agree to do it. RI will not take your word for it that everybody's going to be digital. At least they won't do it for a club the size of mine. So we tried that, and we're told go and get every member to sign a thing saying that they want to go digital, and we'll change it. So it was quite an exacting exercise.
I went digital last year. Our mail service is so bad here. I received December 2018 in February 2020.
You're kidding.
That's right.
Oh my God.
At least you got it. We didn't get it for the past year.
That's crazy. Wow. Yeah, and you know, I guess in the Caribbean, it's par for the course. But you're right, though. I much prefer the digital one because no, I don't have the magazines piling up and cluttering up and everything else. There's another reason.
Yeah, I joined in 2017. I never got it as of now.
Really? Either way?
No, not at all.
But I believe you can ask individually.
Yes.
Was that Navin that spoke before?
Yes, it was.
Yes.
So you can ask yourself separately to get it sent digitally to you.
That's right. I mean, digital is more convenient, you know.
Yeah.
Physical copy, especially in this circumstances where, you know, COVID-19.
Yeah, definitely. In fact, I think the June one, was it June? Just came out. Anyway, something has just arrived from the Rotary. I was reading it the other day.
Santosha, you was going to say something?
Yes, I was just about to go.
Yeah. Best practices as in regards to authorization of outgoing payments, checks, and wire transfer. I guess I need to find out from you guys how your clubs do it. Is it the president only, president and the committee chair? How is the authorization done for any payments?
Yeah, I think it really depends on a number of things. You know, if you're in a small club, you may not need all of 50 people to authorize something. But generally, I know in our club, it has to be the chair or a vice president of the area that is requesting the payment. Is one signatory, well, sign off on the form that's requesting the payment, and at least the treasurer. And the treasurer then has a bit of pressure on them, I guess, to make sure that they're happy with what it is that's going on. So they tend to push, why is this happening? You sure they did that? President, are you okay with this? Etc. So, but the point is to have, I think, at least 2 signatures on that approving piece of paper, so that you know that you're not doing anything unilaterally.
Yeah. So with us, it's always outgoing wise, it's the same thing. The supporting documents, the invoices, they have to be approved by 2 people. Definitely for us, one is a treasurer. Unless I'm on holidays, then it's we have I think 5 people that can sign off: the president, the secretary, the treasurer, and the vice president. 4 people can sign. So you can always have 2 or 2 signatures. But 99.9% of the times, it's usually my signature on the check, the treasurer. And then what we also do is we make sure that a copy of both the invoice and the check itself is scanned and sent to the treasurer for reporting. So you also have the physical copy of the check. And so the wire transfer would be the same thing on the documentation as 2 signatures. And I think most of the banks now are asking you, or at least here in St. Martin, they're asking you for a copy of the invoice as well.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you can't send a wire without the invoice. That's for sure. And the other thing of whatever the bank account signatories are, regardless of who the president is this year, those signatures have to appear on those bank documents. Because I assume it's the same for the rest of you as it is here. To change signatories every year would be, by the time you got it done, you'd be rolling over to the next year's board. So
that was the next question. Signatories.
Yeah, exactly. So we've got, I know in my club, there are 2 or 3 people who are signatories and have been signatories for 10 years or more, because it's too painful to change the signatories. Anything else? So we've covered a fair amount of stuff. I will send the slides, by the way, to everyone, as well as try and dig up those documents that we were talking about, the template of, you know, what your financials should look like. That isn't prescribed by any stretch of the imagination. It's just a suggestion. But hopefully it helps you. And also, don't forget to make use of that Learning Center and Rotary.org in general. Just go in there and look around for anything related to Treasury. I think you might be surprised at how much information is there to help you. And Brian and I are available if we can help. If not, Robert knows everything, so you can ask him. And or your AGs, of course, as we said in the slide presentation. Please call on whomever. Don't flail around in the dark. You know, we want to help you make the most of your year as a very important club officer. Good luck with everything that you've got coming, especially with the new norm that we're living in these days. And I hope you have a fantastic year.
Treasurer's manual will be emailed, you said, right?
The treasurer's manual, yes, I'm going to look for that as well and include that in the package. So probably tomorrow. I've got another call after this to go on, and then I'm going to try and hit the sack. So, but I'll deal with that tomorrow.
How many calls you do in a day?
Too many. Today wasn't too bad. Today was, this is the 3rd, and then the next one, so there's 4, but sometimes 6 or 8.
You're lucky you. This is my 7th. business on Rotary.
Yeah, it never stops.
Yeah. And you're on tomorrow again, right?
Yes, tomorrow again. So Brian and I have a call at 6 before that. That's the reason we changed it to 6, was because I got to be on tomorrow night at 7. So,
Lindsay, am I going to need an interpreter for that call between with you and Phil?
No, man. His accent isn't that strong. He's making fun of our Scottish treasurer of the disaster committee. Anyway, good.
Okay.
All right, folks. Well, thank you so much for the time, and we apologize for having
thank you very much.
to do this a second time, but you know, we had the best intentions in the first go round, and unfortunately Murphy was working overtime that night, and it wasn't meant to be. So
remember, you don't have to struggle. You reach out, ask a question, and if we don't know the answer, we know where to find it.
Right, exactly.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Take care, all.
Cheers.
We'll see you online tomorrow.
All right. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
All right, good night, everybody.